Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Xanadu Gallery's Secrets of Shipping Your Art, Part 1, Paintings. I'm your host and owner of Xanadu Gallery, Jason Horsch. I want to take a moment to welcome you here this evening. And I just briefly, as we begin the broadcast, would like to go over some of the basics of the webinar format. I know that many of you have taken a webinar with us previously, but for those of you who have not, I just wanted to briefly go over the logistics. During the course of the brief workshop this evening, you're going to be able to participate in several different ways. You'll, of course, be able to listen and watch the presentation that I'm making on your screen. I have noticed that some of the slides are showing up a couple seconds delayed to some of you, so don't panic if that happens. They should be catching up to me. You'll also be able to ask questions during the course of the evening, and you can do that in a couple of ways. If you have a microphone hooked up to your computer, you can raise your hand using the hand icon that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. That lets me know that you have a question. I'll be able to bring you into the conversation audibly. You can also use the telephone number that you see on the right-hand screen under the audio section and dial in the code. That would also allow you to ask a question. You'd also need to raise your hand so that I could unmute you and bring you into the conversation. And then you'll also notice that you have a question box. That's an area that you can type questions in, and I'll be able to see those questions and respond to them. I do have a lot of material to cover this evening, so I will probably move through the material first and then leave time at the end of the evening for a question and answer period where I can go back and answer those questions. And I'm going to try something a little different this evening. That is, I'm going to take about a 2-minute break after I make my slide presentation to give you a little time off and also to give me time to sort through the questions that you're putting in so that I can answer those as efficiently as possible. And then any questions that I'm not able to answer during the course of the evening, you can join in the discussion on our Facebook page, where I'll be going in and responding to some of those questions, and I will give you the information on how you can get to that discussion page at the end of the evening. And then, of course, you can always email me with specific questions that you have at jason@xanadugallery.com. You're also going to be able to participate in a couple of polls that will come up during the course of the evening, and then, as I mentioned, I'll leave time for the question and answer period. Shipping. Shipping is one of the topics that I receive a lot of questions on as I'm talking to artists around the country. It's an area that can be an area of great consternation for artists. It can be very expensive, and let's face it, it can be dangerous. You can spend time packaging and shipping your artwork, hand it to that guy in the brown or blue uniform respectively, only to find out that the piece is damaged in shipping. So I want to give you some concrete tips that you can use this evening in being able to package your artwork more efficiently, less expensively, and hopefully have it arrive in a safer manner, that you can avoid some of the damage that comes to artwork through shipping. Why am I able to even talk about this subject? Well, many of you may not know it, but I started out in the art business, over 18 years ago now, working for a large gallery in Scottsdale, and my first job working for them was in their shipping department. So that's kind of where I started to get my feet wet in the art business, and I was able to basically just learn from the ground up. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to ship, probably thousands of pieces of artwork, and I've learned some things that have helped me do so more efficiently. And those are the kinds of things that I want to pass on to you this evening. Of course, don't do much shipping now, but occasionally I'll, if I've got a painting that needs to go out, I'll go into the back room and do some shipping. And it's actually something that I enjoy. It's a hands-on experience for me, and I don't get a lot of that a lot of the time. I want to start out with my 2 basic goals in shipping. And before I do that, I want to just briefly relate an email that I received. Let me actually jump back to my note on that. And this came from Suze Wolf, and she says, I sent a painting to a competition in what I thought was well-packaged box through the post office. Post office might be mistake number 1. It arrived damaged, the frame had been broken, and the plexiglass was scratched, though none of the art was harmed. And I want to just briefly, as I start to change slides here, put a poll out, and I'd like to find out how many of you have experienced damage as you've been shipping artwork. So you'll see in just a moment that poll should come up, and we'll just see how many of you have had poor luck when you've been shipping. And then, like I say, we're going to move on to give you some tips to hopefully avoid that. I'll close this poll in about 5 seconds. About 80% of you have voted or put your answer in, and the numbers are holding pretty steady here. Okay. Let me go ahead and close that now. And I'll share the results with you. It looks like basically 2/3 of you have not had your artwork shipped or damaged in shipping, and 1/3 of you have. I'd just say that probably those 2/3 of you haven't shipped enough artwork to have the odds go against you, because it is almost inevitable as you ship a lot of artwork over time, you're going to run into some damage. So to avoid that, let's start by talking this evening about some tools of the trade. And let me jump to the next slide. I have some basic tools that I use as I'm shipping artwork, and you probably are familiar with most of these, but 2 tools that I find a lot of artists or shippers are not familiar with are the 2 that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. The first is palette wrap, and I'm going to show you how I use that in just a few moments, but this is one tool that you can use in packaging your artwork that alone is going to help save a lot of the little damage that you can get to artwork, damage and dings to frames, scuffs and scratches on the artwork itself. It is a very inexpensive, when you kind of measure it by the foot, a very inexpensive way for you to add an extra layer of protection to your artwork. I'm going to give you at the end of the workshop the link where you can purchase the palette wrap. But if that's one thing alone that you took from this evening, was adding that to your tool chest of shipping tools, palette wrap is a great tool. And then the second item you see there is a box sizer, or it's also often called a carton sizer. I'm not going to talk a lot about that this evening because it's not a tool that I use a lot with paintings. But in my next broadcast 2 weeks from now, as we're talking about shipping 3-dimensional items, sculpture, glass, pottery, etc., you'll see that this is a tool that comes in as an extremely useful tool. So we'll keep that in mind. Then obviously I'm a big fan of using the Sharpie. Magic markers unfortunately dry out so quickly, but I find that a Sharpie will go a long way as I'm packaging. The tape measure, box cutter, and then, of course, my handy tape gun. You'll see that my tape gun is nothing fancy, but I found that this is one that works very well for me in being able to efficiently apply tape, and we're also going to talk about the tape that I recommend that you use in just a few moments. And then the other tool that I use extensively is the T-square. This is, as you're measuring cardboard and trying to get things square and straight, a T-square comes in extremely handy. And again, this is a tool that you might not have thought of using when you're packaging, but it's a tool that will come in extremely handy as you move forward. Now I want to spend just a few moments talking about some of the critical supplies that I use. Obviously, boxes are critical when you're shipping paintings. I have 2 boxes in particular that I try to keep in stock when I'm shipping paintings. And if at all possible, I highly recommend that you order these boxes in bulk. When you can order a bundle of 10 of these boxes, the cost suddenly goes down very dramatically, and to the range of $2 to $3 to $4 per box, as opposed to buying them individually from a packaging store where you might be spending upwards of $10 a box. Over time, that can make a big difference. You can see the 2 sizes that I like. The first is a 37 by 4 3/8, and it can telescope from 30 up to about 60 inches in length. and you can kind of see the image there. This is a very versatile box. It allows me to package a variety of sizes because it has that telescoping feature. Basically, the box comes in two halves, and many of you have probably seen these before. Sometimes I only need to use half the box, and can use the flaps that they score on the top for me. But if the painting is any longer than those 30 inches, I can telescope it out with the top half, and it's a very efficient way to have kind of a minimal number of boxes on hand. And then the second box I use quite extensively is the 28 by 4 by 24. This is something that I can use for most of my work that is under that 24 by 24 size, or actually the 18 by 24 size. And in the example I'm going to show you this evening, that's the box that I use. And then we've got bubble wrap, of course. I typically will order a 24-inch wide roll of bubble wrap, the 1-inch bubble, so that's the large bubble. And I order it perforated, or in industry speak, they say perfed, at 12 inches. That means every 12 inches I've got a perforation. It makes it very easy for me, instead of having to use a tape measure or my T-square to measure out the length of the bubble wrap. I can just pull it out in 1-foot increments, and then it tears off very easily and is very efficient to use. Over the years, I have experimented with a variety of sizes. I've gotten the 36-inch wide bubble wrap, but I find that this 24-inch, if I can just kind of lengthen it and use it in multiple lengths rather than the 36-inch, it gives me more versatility, and so it's really the only bubble wrap that I currently keep in stock. Now the next supply that I keep on hand at all times, it'll take just a second for it to come up on the screen here. This is a cardboard pad. I order them in the 4 by 8 foot sheets. And typically I'm ordering single wall, though you can get it in a stronger, heavier duty double wall as well. And you can order these typically in groups of 10 or increments of 10. And I just always have these on hand because they're so versatile. I'm using them sometimes for the inner box because we always double box the artwork when we're shipping it out. And also sometimes if I need to make a custom size box, I can score it and use it. And then it also comes in handy to be able to place between artwork if you're storing it in your studio or as we do in the back room. Again, a very efficient tool for you to have on hand. Little bulky and hard to deal with sometimes in terms of finding storage for it, but it's worth it for the flexibility that you get to be able to have this on hand. And then tape. Tape is critical, and I am a tape snob. When it comes to my packing tape, I don't want any of the cheap, really thin packing tape that you can pick up. I don't mind spending extra for the tape because I would so much prefer to spend a few extra dollars on my tape than to be spending hundreds of dollars to pay for damage. And so again, I'm a little bit of a snob, but I always buy the best tape that I can find. You can see the image that I'm showing you here comes from Uline, which you can get online. And I always order their 3.5 millimeter tape. That is about the thickest tape that they offer. And I also find that this tape allows me to use just one layer instead of having to use 2 or 3 layers as I do with thinner tape. So in the long run, I kind of feel like I'm not only getting a better tape, but I'm probably actually coming close to paying the same that you are for the less expensive tape that you have to use multiple layers on and is coming off. So 3.5 millimeters is my recommendation. Peanuts. Now, peanuts are a handy tool if you are shipping sculpture or three-dimensional items, but let me say this very clearly. Don't use peanuts for packaging paintings. And I want to put some emphasis on it because it's quite frequent that I will receive a box, a painting in a box, and the artist has wrapped the painting in bubble wrap. Hold on just a second here. And then puts the bubble wrap in the or the bubble wrapped painting in the box and then fills around it with peanuts. Peanuts are great for spacing when you're working with three-dimensional items, but they're just terrible when it comes to paintings because the problem is the bubbles have a tendency to push the sides of the box out. They have a tendency to settle down in. And so what happens is it'll disform the box, and you can get damage because there starts to be more pressure at the bottom of the painting than there is at the top. And then when the painting arrives at its destination, my gallery, for example, I open it up and I have just this huge mess of peanuts that are going to be coming out and getting all over the place. I'm not much one to curse or use profanity, but I have to tell you that when I receive a painting with peanuts in it, that might be the one exception to that rule because it just makes such a mess. So when it comes to packaging your paintings, avoid peanuts. Fragile stickers. I keep these in supply as well, and I plaster them all over the paintings or the packages that I'm sending out, but I want to be very clear on my understanding of the purpose of a fragile sticker. It is something that you put there to make yourself feel good and to make the recipient feel good, so it looks like that you care. But the reality is, as I've talked to UPS and FedEx drivers and other freight companies, a fragile sticker makes virtually zero difference to them. Maybe it decreases your chances of damage by 1 in 100, but the joke, of course, is that if you put fragile stickers all over it, that means that they're going to toss it underhand instead of overhand. I received an email leading up to this broadcast with what I thought was some good advice, and I apologize now because I don't remember who it was that sent it to me. But they said that their test and what they learned was that if you want to make sure your artwork is going to arrive safely, you want to basically package it so that were you to lift it up over your head and drop it, it would not receive or sustain any damage, because that is basically what you can expect, kind of the level of trauma that you can expect to have it happen as it's shipping. And I think that's great advice, and that's kind of how I've always treated the artwork as I'm packaging it. I plan for the very worst because it may not happen, but if it does, I sure want that artwork to arrive safely. So with that in mind, I want to just run you through my basic painting packaging process. The sample artwork that I'm going to show you here is a smaller piece. It was easier for me logistically to put the presentation together with this small piece. But the advice I'm giving you, I use exactly the same process when I'm scaling up to pieces that are, up to 30 by 40, 36, 48, sometimes even a 48 square or larger. So basically, as I'm looking at the piece of artwork, of course, my first step is to measure that piece of artwork, and then I'm going to decide the material sizes that I need. I always leave at least 2 inches around the artwork. That is 2 inches on every side of the artwork between it and the very outer package that I'm shipping in. And I received an email from Kathleen Willer from Milwaukee, and she stated that she'd been shipping with UPS for 17 years and of course insuring that whole time. And she just found out that basically all of that insurance she had used was wasted, which is kind of a good thing because that meant she never had to call on it. But basically that insurance was wasted because she wasn't leaving those 2 inches around the artwork. I have experienced this with UPS as well. If you don't have those 2 inches surrounding the artwork and the artwork is damaged in shipping, UPS is going to come back to you and they're going to point you to the section of their service guide that states very clearly that they will not insure artwork that doesn't, or anything for that matter, that doesn't have at least a 2-inch buffer between the item being shipped and the outer box. So be very, very clear and very careful about making sure you have that clearance. So with this piece, I know I need at least a 22 inches going both directions to get that minimum 2-inch clearance. And so this again would be a perfect example of a painting that would then fit in my 28 by 4 by 24 box. And I don't mind allowing a little bit of extra padding in the box. You don't want want an extreme amount of extra space, because a lot of times you are getting charged by the size of the box. But get to know UPS and FedEx's shipping standards, and you'll find that this 28 by 4 by 24 is exactly the size that fits it under UPS's oversized shipping charges. And I didn't want to get into too many specific details, worrying about their oversized and undersized things, because those can change over time, and it's best to just go to the UPS or FedEx website, and they have pretty clear and detailed instructions on how you can determine how your box is going to be sized or oversized in their system. So once I've selected the box, my next step is to add my first protective layer of skin. And you can see, it'll take just a second for this slide to come up on your screen here. Should be coming up now. You can see that I'm using that palette wrap that I showed you in my tools. And I basically will just wrap that painting 2 or 3 times in the palette wrap, and I'll make sure it's covering the front and the back of the piece and also the sides. And just by doing that, I've almost eliminated any issues that you're going to have with scuffing or scratching the artwork. This is particularly an issue with the piece that you see here, because it doesn't have a frame to help protect it. But even if the piece were framed, I would be using this palette wrap, and I would be wrapping every edge of it. I don't want anything that could be damaged to remain unexposed, so I make sure it's well wrapped in the plastic wrap. I cut it with the knife, and then my next step is to add a layer of cardboard padding. And so you can see in the image, and I'll give it another moment here to show up on your screen, you can see that I have cut a single wall sheet of that 4 by 8 pad that I mentioned earlier, and I've just basically am going to cut it down to size to where it fits pretty snugly on this piece of artwork. So you can see it's kind of halfway through the process here. With my T-square, I'm going to cut it down so there are basically those 2 inches of clearance on either end of the cardboard, and you can see that I'm cutting it down to almost fit exactly to those 2 inches. And I apologize, it looks like our server is running a little slow to get those images up to you. And then my next step is to score the cardboard along kind of widthwise, so that I can fold it to snugly fit around the painting. So I'll take my Sharpie and just put a couple of marks close to the edges of the painting. And then I'm going to add a score that basically allows for the depth of the painting. So in this case, it was about a 2-inch score that I'm adding, and you can see the lines that I've made there. And then I'm going to use my knife, and I just pull it out or let the blade out to a very shallow depth and run it along. I'm not cutting the cardboard, but I'm just adding a thin score to one layer of the cardboard so that it's easier to fold. And next, I fold the cardboard over the piece, and again, it's going to fit very snugly. Just show you a couple of quick images of the folding process. And again, the server is running a little bit slow. And I do see that many of you are putting questions as we go along here, and I am cognizant of them, and we'll certainly come back to those to make sure that we get all those answered at the end of the workshop. Okay, so you can see that I folded, and now the next step would be to tape that pad closed. And basically what I'm doing here is creating an inner box. And then my kind of secret weapon at the end of this inner pad, you'll see in just a moment here, and that is that on the open end, I crimp the edges together and tape the box closed. And by having that folded or that crimped edge, I've added a lot of strength to that end of the painting, so that if it were to take an impact from the side, that cardboard is going to absorb a lot of the shock. Basically, that's my whole goal with this packaging is to absorb shock if the piece is dropped or something bangs into it. And then I tape all the edges, and you can see kind of my finished inner box coming up on the screen here. And there you go. And then my next step is to wrap it in bubble wrap. And you can see coming up how convenient it is to have the perfed bubble wrap. Again, I've just measured out the length that I need. It's very easy to tear it. And then I wrap one layer of that bubble wrap around the inner cardboard box. Tape it. And again, I'm just letting this run a little slow so I can make sure you can all see these images. And then my final step in adding bubble wrap is to take 1 foot, again this is a 24-inch wide, but I'll take 1 foot of the bubble wrap, fold it in half lengthwise, and tape it to the end of the box. I'm giving myself some extra padding on that end. And so again, you can see now coming up on your screen the finished inner box wrapped with bubble, and you see that it has that extra layer of bubble wrap on the end as an extra layer of shock absorption. And now we go to the box. And no magic here. I just basically tape up the ends of the box. And goodness, we're running slow. Go ahead and slip the painting in. And then in order to get a secure seal on the box, I tape all of the seams. So you're going to see in the next image that I've run tape along the top edge. I've run it along the short seams on the top edge. And then I'll actually run tape all the way around the box going both directions. Again, my philosophy when it comes to tape is that tape is relatively inexpensive. So I want to use a good amount of it to make sure that the box isn't coming apart in shipping and can take any kind of hits that it takes. I would rather use too much tape than not enough. And there you have it. Our box is now packaged and ready to go. A couple of questions that have come up already are related to the palette wrap that I'm using, and the question is, does it stick to the surface of the painting? And it's actually, that question has come in a couple of forms. Does it stick to oil paintings? Does it stick to acrylic paintings? And in my experience, it does not. It is specifically designed not to adhere to the surface itself. Your one concern there would be if you're dealing with a lot of heat, which of course we do in Arizona. And in that instance, I'm going to just poke a couple of holes in the backside of it to allow it to breathe. But in the many years that I've been shipping, I've never had a problem with this palette wrap. As long as you're using the heavy-duty palette wrap that's very thick, I've never had a problem with it sticking to the surface. Of course, the other issue there would be that you'd want to make sure that the painting has fully cured and that you don't have any wet paint remaining, or else you may have a potential issue there. And then, of course, the other question that raises is, do we want to, in terms of the piece that we just shipped, do we have those 2 inches all the way around it? And you saw it in the box there, and that's exactly what I've aimed for. I've got 2 inches on the 2 sides. I've got 2 inches between the top and the bottom, and I probably actually in this box have even a little bit more than that because of the 28-inch length of the box. So again, I've just made sure that I have 2 inches on every side of the piece. You'll notice that the box is 4 inches deep, so you're not getting the 2 inches from the front to the back, but by having it double boxed, I found that I don't have any trouble with UPS saying it's not thick enough. As long as I've got those 2 inches of padding on all four of the sides of the piece. The depth hasn't been an issue for us. Now, that will raise the next question, and that is, okay, what carrier should I use? When I'm shipping smaller work, and that's typically 30 by 40 or smaller, I am almost always going to use either UPS or FedEx Ground. I found that their rates are the best for those kind of logistics. I will, if it's going to be larger, then I will typically use Bel Air or one of the other freight forwarders. And the reason I use Bel Air most frequently is because even when I get quotes, and I will do that from time to time, quote it out to make sure that I'm getting the best price and the best service. Bel Air is a company that has done a great job for me over the years, and I find that they are very competitive and usually less expensive than other air freight forwarders. Now, I've run into people who've used UPS freight or FedEx freight. In my experience, you're literally talking about the difference between $200 to ship a painting and sometimes $500 or $600 if you're using FedEx freight over a company like Bel Air. Bel Air is very efficient at getting larger artwork shipped inexpensively. And that also raises the question, I mentioned earlier that this is a process that I use for shipping smaller pieces, 30 by 40 or smaller, sometimes 48 by 48. And the question has come up from a couple of people, what if you're shipping larger works, 3672 or larger? There are times where I will make a custom cardboard box for larger pieces and ship it Bel Air. But in my experience, I have found that I am better served when it comes to the larger pieces by having a professional crater ship it. And if you live in a metropolitan area, you should be able to find someone who focuses on shipping fragile items or shipping art. And here's my experience. When I started the gallery and doing, had our own shipping to do, initially, I was building some of my own wood crates. I had access to a large wood shop, and my feeling was, well, we're a young business. We've got a little more time on our hands than money, so I'll just build my own crates. And so I was doing that. I had a system in place for measuring and designing the crates, wrapping them, padding them, all that kind of stuff, and then ship them out on Bel Air, one of the other freight forwarders. Well, several years ago, as I had a particular piece that I was going to ship out, I happened to have a conversation with an art shipper in my area, and I asked him to quote it out. Now, imagine my consternation when the quote that came back to me was, so this included all of the crating, padding, packing, and the freight to get the artwork from Scottsdale, Arizona to its destination. And that quote came back for less than it would have cost me just to ship the piece, just to have the freight part, pay for the freight part of it myself. So in other words, most of the time, not only was it going to be easier for me because I wasn't going to have to build the crates, but I was going to end up saving money to have this professional shipper ship it for me, because I wasn't going to have to be paying for all the crating materials, etc. A lot of times the professional art shippers do enough volume that they get discounts in the freight costs that will basically make up for the cost of the crate. So my basic advice is I would rather have you in the studio creating the artwork instead of in the shop trying to build a crate for it. Obviously, if you're set up to build crates and you can find a way to do it efficiently, and you can find a shipper that will ship it for you inexpensively, there might be an argument to be made to do it yourself. But in most cases, you're going to be better served with larger pieces to have them professionally crated or to use an air float crate or something like that, as opposed to trying to go to the trouble of building a custom crate yourself. Insurance. And let me just hit our second poll here, and that is, how many of you insure your artwork when you're shipping it? and I'll launch that. And while that's coming up, I just want to read a note that I received from Dana Zier. And she says, I learned that if you insure the painting for a goodly sum, they'll arrive unharmed and perfect. If you don't, you take your chances. I don't know if that's a scientific finding that she has made, or if it's just kind of chance, or if it's reality. But I kind of have the same philosophy. If the freight company knows that they're going to have to pay out on it, the hope would be that they would treat it with a little bit more care. Now that may or may not be the case, and you have to think that some of the people in the freight process have no idea whether it is insured or not. But again, my philosophy is let them insure it. So basically, in my case, I have an umbrella coverage for an umbrella insurance coverage through my insurer that will cover any major damage. But then with my carrier, I typically will ask them to cover it for about $1,000. FedEx will only cover up to $500 on fine art. So basically, my breakdown is $999 with UPS, and I do that amount because if you do $1,000, it triggers additional trouble for you, inspections and that kind of thing. But at $999, you don't have those kind of issues. $500 for FedEx, and then $1,000 if I'm using Bel Air. And then another question that will frequently come up is international shipping. Are there any tricks of the trade for international shipping? I just want to give you a couple of tips there. I could probably do a whole workshop just on the things that I've learned on international shipping. But the basics of those are that when it comes to international shipping, let me go ahead and close our poll. And I'll just tell you that 80% of you do insure your artwork and your shipping, and 20% do not. Okay, so let me bring up the international shipping slide. And so my first bit of advice when it comes to international shipping is that I always allow for extra space and extra padding when I'm shipping internationally. You've got more hands on the package. You also have some international companies dealing with the package. So I'm going to try and leave some extra padding there to deal with that extra potential danger that I'm running into. If possible, I always plan on the box being opened, and that means I'm going to package it in a way that if a customs inspector had to get into it, they could just cut the top tape, open that. They could then basically just remove some of the tape from the top seam, and then as you saw with my inner box, I have one seam on either side. I make sure that seam is facing upward so that they can again just cut the tape there without having to remove the entire piece of artwork from that outer box. So try and keep in mind that they may be opening it for inspection. You want to plan it to be as simple as possible for them to do that, because the more they touch it, the more they pull it out, the more likely it is to be damaged. Always include 3 copies of your your invoice when you're shipping internationally, and make it look as official as possible on letterhead. That's going to save time for the recipient on the other end in clearing it through customs. And then my final advice when shipping internationally is, if at all possible, try and ship to a business address as opposed to a residential address. Again, this is going to help it get through customs more quickly. And a lot of times you will avoid value-added tax charges and potentially duties, even though duties typically aren't charged on artwork. You're just going to save yourself a lot of hassle if you can ship it to a business address as opposed to a residential address. And then finally, and I already jumped on that. I just wanted to give you a couple of resources as far as supplies. Actually, I eliminated one because I found that my best resource for the supplies that I'm ordering is Uline, and you can go to their website at uline.com. And they have an extensive catalog. All of the items that I showed you in my supplies are available through their website, and I've had good experience working with them. There are some items that I order from local shipping suppliers. For example, my Bubblewrap. because it's so bulky, it ends up being quite expensive to ship. But if you have a large shipment coming from Uline, you know, a bunch of boxes and maybe some of the pads, it's worth at least getting a quote on the bubble wrap as well. Most major metropolitan areas are going to have, you know, a number of different companies that will provide shipping supplies. Go to your yellow pages, look them up, and quote them as well. But Uline is a good one. I found that their prices beat even my local supplier when it comes to a lot of the boxes that they supply. Boy, we are running quickly out of time. In fact, we're kind of right to the end of that. So I do want to take just a minute to take some of your questions. So let me do this. I'm going to go offline for just 1 minute, and any of you that need to leave because we run out of time can do that. But I'll go offline for about a minute, minute and a half, and I want to go through some of the questions that you've asked. If you have questions that you'd like to ask audibly, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll try and bring as many of you can online. And I do see that there are a number of you. So I'll be back online in about a minute and a half. Okay, and I am back online. And boy, I've got literally hundreds of questions that have come in, so I'm only going to be able to get to a small portion of them. I do want to definitely invite you to come to our Facebook page where you can post those questions on the discussion board there, and I'll show you that. In fact, I'll just go ahead and bring that address up so that as I'm answering other questions, you maybe make a note of it. And I will be looking at that message board and trying to respond to the questions, and then also you can post your responses to other people's questions as well, so it can be a very conversational. Let me go first. I've got a number of hands raised, and I'm going to go first. Let's see if I've got Patricia Roth. Patricia, are you available? Hi, Patricia. Are you there?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, I am actually. You are online. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Well, it's been a very hard session for me because I haven't been able to get the video, and something. Go to somebody else.
Okay, I will do that. And let me just mention, I know that sometimes the servers can be a little bit slow. Let me go ahead and mention now, though, that I have been recording the session. So I will have video available. It will be on the website, and I'll send out a link to everyone so you can go back to that. Sometimes connections are slow or whatever, so I'll make sure those are available. Let me go then to, just give me 1 second here. And if your question has already been answered, you can go ahead and click on the hand button again, and your hand will go down. I'm going to go to Diane, and I'm not even going to try to say your last name, Diane. It's C-Z-A-I-J, and then lots of consonants. Diane, are you available? Oh, and apparently I had her hand go down as well. Let's go to Darlene Larson. Darlene, are you available? Do you have a question? Now it looks like our questions are not coming in. So let me take some of the questions that you've typed in. And a lot of them have been related to the pallet wrap. You seem intrigued by it, but you're not sure if it's going to work for your medium. This question came from, looks like Patricia, and that is, can I use the pallet wrap for collage work? I will say that I have used the palette wrap on a vast variety of materials. Again, paintings. I use it on some of the sculptures that I ship, and I have used it on collage. As long as it's not putting pressure on any of the materials on the work, it'll be safe to use. And if it is going to potentially put pressure, you can offset it with some cardboard padding along the sides of the piece, and then try and get it off the artwork. But again, I still try and use that padding everywhere I can. Let's look at a couple of other questions. One question is, if you use a frame, do you put protective corners on it? This came from Tyra Moore. I don't use the protective corners. You can certainly get them inexpensively. I've just found that again, they're a little bit of a hassle as far as putting them on, and I don't feel that they give me that much added protection over having that the inner layer of cardboard pad. So I don't tend to use them. Of course, there's no reason not to, and if you feel like it gives you a little bit of extra protection, then definitely go ahead and do that. Again, it looks like I had some hands raised that had gone offline, so I just wanted to take everyone's hand down. Now, if you do have a question, let me go ahead and click on your hand again. Let me go to Tom Haas. Tom, are you available?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Jason.
Oh, you bet. What is your question?
My question is, using the palette wrap, would you recommend using that as wrapping my paintings as they're stored in my studio as well as shipping?
Again, they can add that layer of protection. My one concern with having it wrapped for a long period of time would be condensation. So I would make sure that if you're using them for storage in the studio, that you leave some breathing holes so that it can basically aerate. And you'd even have to be careful if you're layering multiple layers and then stacking the artwork together. You wouldn't want to have those holes get covered up. You'd want to make sure that the artwork could continue to breathe.
Oh, okay.
And suddenly I have lost my ability. Hold on. Looks like I've got Diane still has a question. Let me see if I can bring her on. Diane, are you available?
Yes, Jason, I am.
Oh, great. What is your question?
My question is about shipping glass paintings. Paintings that are covered with glass, framed in glass like a watercolor. I've heard that you can tape the glass and do it that way, but I would think that would make kind of a mess on the glass. What is your take on shipping something that's already framed in glass?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that because many of the attendees do work in pastels or watercolors. Basically, my overall process is the same, but I do exactly what you mentioned in that I will use either 2 or 3 inch wide masking tape, and I will tape an X across the front of the piece, and then I'll run some tape lengthwise on it. And I do this out of experience because I've seen glass broken in shipping, and basically if I can have that masking tape over the surface, it's going to prevent the glass from shattering and scratching the surface of the piece. Potentially, yes, you have some problem with some residue, some glue on the surface, but if you're using a high-quality masking tape, you won't typically have that kind of problem. So I definitely do that, and you can actually even find masking tape that comes in 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch, and with that masking tape you can cover the entire surface of the glass, and again it's fairly easy to remove. So I would go ahead and do that just to make sure you don't have issues with breakage. Boy, we have gone way over our allotted time, unfortunately. A lot of additional questions here. It looks like there are a lot of questions regarding international shipping. So what I may have to do is put together a whole session just on international, and I may do that after we do our session in 2 weeks on shipping 3-dimensional items. Again, if you get a chance, go to our Facebook page. That's our Xanadu Gallery Successful Art Marketing page. And if you just search for Xanadu Gallery, you'll see that one. Click on the discussion tab, and you'll see that that's one of the first discussions available. I will be monitoring that discussion over the next several days and really in the coming weeks as you have additional questions. And again, feel free to answer questions. If you have tips that you can give, it's an opportunity for an interactive discussion. I want to thank you for attending this evening. It's been a good session, and again, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to get to everyone's questions. But if you have that pressing question that you can't even wait for the discussion board on, feel free to email me. I'm always contactable at jason@xanadugallery.com, and I can point you in the right direction. I look forward to having you join us for future broadcasts. I'll be sending out an email with the link to the recording of this workshop so that you can reference back to it. And also, of course, no broadcast would be complete without me putting in a brief plug for my book. And of course, that applies here with shipping as well. If you want to have more excuses to ship your artwork because you've sold it, my book can be a great resource for you to find gallery representation and better sell your artwork. And that is available at xanadugallery.com/book. Thanks for attending this evening. I will look forward to seeing you in a future broadcast.